Hey, I'm Ryan Reynolds. At Mint Mobile, we like to do the opposite of what Big Wireless does. They charge you a lot, we charge you a little. So naturally, when they announced they'd be raising their prices due to inflation, we decided to deflate our prices due to not hating you. That's right. We're cutting the price of Mint Unlimited from $30 a month to just $15 a month. Give it a try at mintmobile.com/switch.
$45 up front for 3 months plus taxes and fees. Promo rate for new customers for limited time. Unlimited more than 40 gigabytes per month. Slows full terms at mintmobile.com.
We're going to revisit 1966, the year, Al.
Well, it was the year, I suppose, what many think is everybody relates to England's finest hour.
Yeah.
Which we've discussed before in different ways, which became really our unfinest hour in many ways. But no, it's a great year for me because I once did a DVD about the best days of my life, which was my couple of years at Stoke. 2 or 3 years at Stoke, but that was on. Well, it was not only on the field; it was with my off-the-field relationship with Tony Waddington. But that was in '75. But '66 were the best days of my life because I was only 15. You know, just leaving school. School days were the best days, but that was the year that I signed apprentice for Chelsea, and obviously it all started to happen.
And it was at the birth of a dream. And we always start with a picture, and we always post up the picture on our socials, Alan Hudson _10 on Twitter and Alan Hudson on Facebook. And we've got a show account for Twitter at My Life My Music 6, and on Facebook My Life My Music. And it's that photograph that you posted, Al, of you as a young un in your Chelsea youth days. So let's just stay on that photograph and you describe behind the lens what was going on there.
Well, it was a strange, I suppose strange could be the word. I'd been at the bridge for about 18 months on training on a Tuesday and Thursday. I didn't really want to go, but I didn't really want to play for Chelsea. I wanted to play for Fulham. I'd never been a Chelsea supporter, but I remember my dad. He used to, when he got home from work early enough, he would force me to go, really, without being forceful. You've got to go. You know, he just really, really, really didn't want. He just knew that I was going to be a player. He would tell everyone. He would insist when anybody ever mentioned a footballer. He says, my Adam will be better than all of them. He was like that, my dad. And if it weren't for him, I obviously wouldn't have become a footballer. But it was those times, and it was the start of it really was a great time to be an apprentice. And the worst thing that ever happened was, you know, I was writing. I'm writing this new book, and I wrote something. It's similar to the line, you've seen it. I've sent it to you before, about Shawshank Redemption. It's when I signed pro and got into the big time. You know, it was like going into Shawshank when he said, you know, I was innocent on the outside, but now I've had to come inside to be, you know, what I've become. And that's really what happened to me. I just loved life before as a kid. I just loved being a young kid around the streets in Chelsea with, you know, we were very close friends, and it was a very close-knit place. I'm sure it was where you are and where everybody was in them days. You know, the days where you could leave your door open and, you know, there was not a problem, and everybody was welcome. My prefab was a fantastic place to be. My mother was like a cafe, you know. she did the best breakfast, and everybody would go to there to have breakfast, and it was just great. It was they were the most fantastic days. 1966 was an incredible year, and I was just at the age where it was like walking through a tunnel, really, and walking into a new world with the music and everything else, and the dress and everything else. Into the King's Road was like walking. It was really what the Beatles were all about. It was like walking into a psychedelic age, really, in many ways. You went from a young kid in school clothes and short trousers into this big world of. It was like so romantic. It was fantastic. It was great days.
Well, you've referenced the Beatles, so we're going to start with the Beatles and Paperback Writer. But just before we get on to the first track, can you remember some of your teammates in that Chelsea youth team days? And was it at Welsh Harps, that photograph where it was
It was
taken?
Welsh Harp, yeah. It was a Welsh Harp at Hendon. It was just off the. It was just off the very, very close to Wembley. It was just off the North Circular Road. As you go, I'm sure many people pass it without knowing they pass it. And they had a big old pub there, the Welsh Harp pub. In them days, I don't think we ever went into the Welsh Harp pub, but being 15 and all that. But I used to go to other pubs in Chelsea at 15. But it was a great place. It was it really was. When I look at today's footballers training at Cobham, at Chelsea, and I think of our upbringing, we really had it tough. I mean, it was a pitch that ran downhill, and the water ran downhill into a lake, and old dressing rooms, and I remember the old boy Jock that used to run the place. I'll never forget one day, when the mum and dads were coming in for a game on Saturday. He used to stir the tea with the piece of wood with paint on it, and he used to paint the lines with them, stuff like that. It was like comedy. It was like comedy film, really. But it was great as it was great as a 15-year-old. When I look at 15-year-olds today, it makes me very, very sad. That we had such a fantastic upbringing. But Welsh Harp was I can only call it, really, if in horse racing terms, it was like Cheltenham.
Yeah.
It was like the Cheltenham Hill. When they come up the Cheltenham Hill, we're going up that hill, and if you was, especially in the second half, you had to be fit. And it was great times. I was very, very fortunate as well that I had the two fellas running our team, the youth team. One was Frank Blunston, who's still with us, thankfully. He came from Crewe. He played at Crewe, and he played in the Chelsea team that won the first championship. I think it was around that time, 54, 55. Well, 10 years earlier, but Frank was one of our youth coaches, and the other one was a great Spurs player called Tommy Harmer, with the youth called Charmer, and I knew them both from training at the bridge on a Tuesday and Thursday, and obviously they were the coaches, but they weren't really coaches. I don't think they had coaching badges. They just both played for Tommy Docherty. Tommy liked them both, and I think Tommy, when he went to Manchester United, took Frank with him, actually. I don't know what he did at Manchester United, Frank, but as I say, Paul, they weren't coaches, and they were more older statesmen of the game, and would just try and advise you on the best thing to do. But I was fortunate enough that I had my coach at home, really, in my father.
I think what you're saying, Alan, I think you're absolutely bang on with it, is that in those days they didn't have badges to say that there was coaches, but neither did football players have badges to say that they were football players, but they were all football people. And in Tommy's case, forming a boot room, probably at Manchester United, having people that he respected and trusted and worked with and knew that they knew the game of football inside out. And in essence, those people, they never needed badges.
No, no. I mean, God knows what. Only God knows what Tommy. What happened to Tommy, because Tommy Doherty built such a fantastic thing at Chelsea. He had a great. He had I'm not. Dickie Foss, I think his name was. He was the main scout, and they had the line of players coming through. But strangely enough, they were all mainly from East London and Scotland.
Yeah.
Dickie used to do East London, and he had a Scottish scout that brought the Scottish players down. And I truly believe that to this day that in 1965, 66, 67, 67 was when they lost to Spurs in the final. That was a final that never really went ahead, because they were going to play in it, because they couldn't get their cup final tickets, and they were out in the Dormy Hotel in Bournemouth to about 4 or 5 in the morning, refusing to play, and they gave them the tickets at the last minute. So I might have been in that final. I might have been in that final at 15 years of age, because they didn't have enough players.
Yeah.
So, but I just don't understand why Tommy went like he went, because he was building something fantastic, and I can remember him going to Anfield, knocking Liverpool out the FA Cup when they was untouchable at home, and I think that was a year of Osgood, his first season. I think Ozzy scored 1 goal and Bobby Tamlin scored the other, and I truly believe to this day that would have been the team, and he said later on that he always thought of me of being taken over from Terry Venables, because Venables was in that team, George Graham was in that team, two players that went on to become quite iconic managers and incredibly successful,
Absolutely, and there was certainly talk about Alan Hudson making his Chelsea debut and being probably one of the youngest ever to have made that debut for the Blues of London. But you were dogged a little bit by injuries, wasn't you? And even when you did make your injury at your debut a few years later, you'd also been on the treatment table. But paperback writer, number one. There was 20 number ones, by the way, in 1966. This was one of them.
It's a little bit like the Premier League today, isn't it?
It spent 2 weeks at number one from the 21st of June, so it was like pre-World Cup song for England by the Beatles. And I guess as well, in essence, Al, could be your signature tune.
That was actually my 15th birthday, yes.
Yeah, of course it was, wasn't it?
21st of June, 1951. 51, but that would have been my birthday. But I was into the Beatles big time. I mean, there was nothing like the Beatles for me at that time. They were the greatest thing I'd ever heard, and I was only a kid. In my house it was all, we had parties in my house, and we had parties in everybody's house in them days, but it was all Sinatra, Tony Bennett and Jack Jones and Al Martino and all the great old crooners. But for me, it was the Beatles, and I suppose they had a big big part to play in my life. It just and in them days I liked McCartney, but as time went by, I became a massive John Lennon fan. So and I think I got a little bit like him in the end, really.
I think he did. Both genial figures. You've referenced Frank, so that leads us nicely into our second track, Strangers in the Night, 3 weeks at number one from the 31st of May in 1966. What got you into Frank? Was it, again, those parties in your house? And have you got a favourite Frank Sinatra song?
Yeah, my favourite Sinatra song was Soliloquy, funnily enough, which come out of one of the big movies.
Yeah.
And I think probably a lot to do with it is because it was all about my boy Bill.
Yep.
My dad was named Bill. My nephew's young Billy. We got another Billy in the family. It was all about my boy Bill. No, it was just. There's no doubt about it. I don't think since Michael Bublé came along, I've ever been impressed by. There's some fantastic singers around in them days. All them, the Italian thing. It was the Italian thing. I love these Italian movies as well, and this new one, The Irishman. Jerry Vowell's in that, sings in that. Jerry Vowell's got the most.
Millions of people have lost weight with personalized plans from Noom, like Evan, who can't stand salads and still lost 50 pounds.
Salads generally for most people are the easy button, right? For me, that wasn't an option. I never really was a salad guy. That's just not who I am. But Noom worked for me.
Get your personalized plan today at Noom.com. Real Noom user compensated to provide their story. In 4 weeks, the typical Noom user can expect to lose 1 to 2 pounds per week. Individual results may vary.
Hey, I'm Ryan Reynolds. At Mint Mobile, we like to do the opposite of what Big Wireless does. They charge you a lot, we charge you a little. So naturally, when they announced they'd be raising their prices due to inflation, we decided to deflate our prices due to not hating you. That's right. We're cutting the price of Mint Unlimited from $30 a month to just $15 a month. Give it a try at mintmobile.com/switch.
$45 up front for 3 months plus taxes and fees. Promo rate for new customers for limited time. Unlimited more than 40 gigabytes per month. Slows full terms at mintmobile.com.
Wonderful voice, and I think very soon we'll be talking about Johnny Haynes. Well, the story goes that Johnny Haynes went to America and come back with a Jerry Vowell LP, and everybody in Chelsea was playing Jerry Vowell. You know, it was a time of unlike today. I mean, kids of today don't know. In my eyes, they know nothing about music. You know, Sinatra was just, and as a young man, they reckon he had a wonderful voice even later on in life. But when he was a kid, he had the most extraordinary voice. And I've read all his stuff, and I've seen everything they've done about him on TV and film and everything else. And he was the one that used to, tell the band leaders how to play the music. He was just, and I also believe that he died at birth, so there was something really unique, quite unique about him. They had to put him under a cold. His grandmother put him under a cold, ran him under a cold tap because he stopped breathing, and so we nearly lost Frank at that age, and then again all them years later, oddly enough, when I was in a coma, he was in a coma. Yeah. So, he's played a big part in my life.
And while we're talking about comas, let's just reflect on 1997, when you had that bad car accident. You were in that coma, and it was the 15th of December when you got hit by the car. So very, very recently, but a very long time ago. And when I say recently, we're recording this just a few days after the 15th of December. How did that day go, and how do you reflect on that day now, Alan?
Well, I still I still write about it quite a lot. People might get fed up with me writing about it.
I don't.
Put it on.
Brilliant.
Yeah. But it's I think what it is, why I write about it so much, I think it's we all get down, we all get, life can, especially at times like this. I mean, it's a terrible time to be living at the moment. I've never had so many negative phone calls. I've got a couple of people who are ill. I've got a couple of friends who've lost friends, and it really is one of my great friend Peter Millard, who I look after. He's 83 now. He was friends with my father, but we've remained great friends. And he said to me one day, he says, "I promise you, Al, this was worse than the World War II. It really is. It's just extraordinary." And we're living in bad times, and my time in hospital in the whole of 1998, I spent the whole year in there. I still look back and say it was the greatest year of my life. It was the greatest challenge. It made all these tough football matches against hard teams and hard players like a walk in the park. Really, it was so rewarding meeting these young kids, young doctors, and when I see earlier in the year and clapping the NHS and things like that, it really turned me off, because these people have been doing it forever and ever and ever. These young kids who looked after me were just incredible, coming in every morning with a smile on their face, and we used to play pranks on each other, tricks, and we used to go to the pub together. It was, it was great. It was such a great time, and of course then there was the doctor that saved my life. So it was. I come across. What happened to me in hospital, Paul, was it confirmed to me that football managers are frauds.
Yeah.
These people who are saving people's lives. I mean, David Goodyear saved first he saved my legs, and then he saved my life. But they are professional people. These are professional in our game in football. That is not the right word, because they're not professional. They don't learn their trade. They're just put into a job, and most of them are incapable. It's probably why we haven't won nothing or been to a final since 1966. Management is a word used very, very loosely, because they don't know how to manage people. That's what went wrong with me. I needed management. The David Goodyear, when I was in hospital, went into a trauma meeting, and one doctor said, "I think we should forget about this patient," which was me, and concentrate on someone who's going to live. And David didn't say nothing, and he left the trauma meeting, and he walked round to the ITU, and he checked me out. He checked all my vitals. He looked at my past, and he called another trauma meeting, and he had a go at this doctor. He said, he will be all right. He will live, and he'll survive. But what he needs is stronger management. And life's fun at a strange place, because that's what I needed when I left Chelsea. I needed stronger management.
Yeah.
And I got it when I went to Stoke. I went from a weak manager in Dave Sexton to a very strong manager in Tony Waddington. He was a very gentle man, but he was so strong in his ways and his beliefs, and you couldn't believe it, and it so kind of all comes back to you. All these things come back to you when I was in hospital, and my youth come back to me. As I say, Frank was in a coma in New York while I was in a coma in London, and I think it's quite a fascinating. It would make a fascinating film, because it's a little bit too bizarre to be true, But that was the best, without doubt, the best year of my life. So rewarding, and the challenges is like they reckon the Cheltenham Gold Cup is the hardest race in the world, and the Grand National is the hardest race in the world. Well, it was no tougher than the year I had in hospital, and the challenges and the challenges I had when I was in a coma, because I knew nothing about that, but they wrote me off a few times. So it was quite fantastic. So I think that's why I sit down, I write about it each day, and I'm writing a book at the moment. called the lockdown year, the lockdown Premier year, and I relate a lot to that year because what we lack in English football. I watched it again yesterday. Players jumping on the floor, diving, and there was none of that in hospital. You couldn't shirk anything in hospital, and I had a fantastic physiotherapist called Claire Strickland, and you couldn't shirk nothing. And even as hard as I tried and I did. I mean, I worked hard in the gym, and even when I couldn't get out of my wheelchair, and if I spoke to anyone, and a couple of friends would come in and sit on the side, and if I spoke to them, she would reprimand me, no talking over there, one of them. So yeah, it was all great. It was great stuff, but it all worked, and it was just it was a memorable time, and I think that's what kind of why I've reacted the way I've reacted even now. I say to people that moan and everything else, that if I'm in a pub or if I'm out and people complaining about something else, get on with it. Enjoy yourself, enjoy your life, and it takes me back to again being 15. The people I was brought up around in Chelsea, they just lived life to the full, and every night was a Saturday night. I remember the Mancinis in the Lord Palmerston would be ready with all the gear to take around, all putting all the beer on and spirits on the bath to be taken around someone's house to have a party on a Saturday night, and this was what life was about then, and it is quite the opposite now. It's gone from one extreme to the other, and as I say, this is why 1966 was such a fabulous year.
There was no tears, only tears of joy in London in 1966. Sadly, there are 4 tears these days, and we just hope that soon it will end. You referenced Johnny Haynes, the maestro, one of your heroes, going to America. And our next track is My Love by Petula Clark, that got to #1 in America and written by another great songwriter, Tony Hatch. So let's talk about the maestro for a bit, Johnny Haynes.
Well, before we go on to Johnny, I must say that it's quite ironic that my mother at that time was working in a what they used to call a bistro.
Yeah.
And she was working somewhere in the King's Road, and little did I didn't know in them days. But and she was the one that told me that Johnny Haynes came in one night with Petula Clark.
Yeah.
So he was dating, and she was a beautiful girl. She had the most wonderful voice. So that was what was happening around that time. And then later on, I was a big fan of hers musically. Later on, again, I got to know Johnny. My friend Tony Millard, he used to run bars, and he was running a bar at Ealing Studios, and he put a function on for me when I come out of hospital, and he said, "I've got a surprise for you tonight." I obviously didn't know what he was on about, and he had phoned, because Johnny Haynes, while he was playing for Fulham, he got involved with a bookmaker called Tommy Benfield, and Tommy was a gentleman, and Tommy loved Johnny so much as a player and as a man. Although he was the first £100 a week footballer, Tommy put him on shares in the betting shop and looked after him, and Johnny met a woman and moved up to Edinburgh and kind of went off the radar, and he drove down Tommy picked him up, and they drove down from Edinburgh to Ealing Studios on this night as a guest, and it was just quite extraordinary. I can't imagine that happening today.
No.
Because Johnny Haynes used to knock about in Chelsea. He used to go into certain pubs. I don't think he was a big drinker, but he something about the Well's End that Johnny liked, and especially him, it would be like it would be like Ali McCoist, the story of Ali McCoist walking into a pub, with all the Celtic fans, really. But John was such a wonderful man, and what a footballer, and that was where the number 10 started from. I used to watch him play. The sad thing about that was I didn't see. I didn't really understand the game as much at 15 years, and then years going up to 15, 16. But I did understand that Johnny Haynes was something a bit special, and obviously he wore the number 10 shirt, and that was the one that I always wanted to wear.
I've just done recently a My 70s with Malcolm McDonald, and Malcolm was telling me about being the first £100 a week football player, Johnny Haynes, and he bought a new Jag, and on the first day he crashed it. and I thought, is there something synonymous with the number 10 and cars? Because Jack Grealish has just banged up his car. And also, when Stoke City, famous number 10, was had a roundabout named after him.
Yeah, there must be something wrong with their driving skills. I think they probably had football on their mind at the time when they were driving. Yes, I drove over a roundabout in Newcastle under Lyme, and they named it was right near the golf course there, and I come out unscathed. I mean, I should have died that night instead of in the Marlon Road, really, because I remember the following day I found my friend at his pub, my local pub there, called Lenny Bacon, and I said, Lenny, can you run me up the road to pick my car up? I parked it next to a roundabout, and it was actually my wife's brand new Mini I bought her, and she said, I'll come, I'll drive it back. And when we got there, it was on top of the roundabout, so hence it's called the Alan Hudson roundabout now. And I actually wrote to the council and said, you need to put lights on the end of the road there where the roundabout is, and they did it. So instead of being reprimanded again.
To listen to the rest of this podcast, please go to www.patreon.com/SRBmedia, or just follow the links in the description. Thank you. SRBmedia.
As dawn broke over the seven seas, the pirates of the Crimson Galleon set sail for adventure. But there was one problem: paperwork. Mountains of it. Filing, invoices, you name it.
This work ain't fit for a pirate.
Luckily, their captain had an idea. She used the smart buying tools on Amazon Business, so they could work more efficiently and get back to doing what they do best. I know, right? Amazon Business, your partner for smart business buying.